Hi class, my name is Andrea Canton, and I decided to choose alcohol abuse impacts a family. I decided to pick this topic because unfortunately my fiance grew up in a family with alcohol abusers, so I thought it would be interesting to dive more into this topic to see how it affected him. And I also thought it would be really interesting to include an interview with him at the end of my presentation so he can explain how it affected him more personally. So let's get started. What is alcohol use disorder, also known as AUD? Alcohol use disorder is a pattern of alcohol use that involves problems controlling your drinking, being preoccupied with alcohol, or continuing to use alcohol even when it causes a problem. So some statistics for the US include 141,000 Americans die from the effects of alcohol in an average year. 10% of Americans over the age of 12 have alcohol use disorder, and 60% of Americans increase their alcohol consumption during COVID-19 lockdowns. In 2014, roughly 16.3 million adults in the US had AUD, and of those with AUD, only 8.9% received treatment. Teenage alcohol abuse rates are climbing in the US as an estimated 855,000 adolescents, and that includes ages 12 to 17, have AUD in 2012. And the number of adults seeking treatment from a specialized alcohol facility remained consistent in recent years as to around only 1.2%. More specifically to California, 15,000 estimated deaths per year occur because of alcohol abuse. In those deaths, 69% of them are male. 86.1% are over the age of 35 years old, and 2.49% are under the age of 21 years old. And California taxpayers spent around $35 billion as a result of excess alcohol use in 2010. 16.6% of Californians over the age of 18 binge drink at least once per month. And when I was doing this assignment, I didn't realize that binge drinking was only 5 drinks or more in one sitting, or 15 or more drinks in 1 week. I feel like binge drinking is definitely more normalized and not really looked at as alcohol abuse as much as it should be. So how does this impact the family? So a person with alcohol abuse will probably have to deal with various health issues that result from consuming that much alcohol. And because of the alcohol abuse, they tend to neglect a lot of their important duties. They might encounter legal problems, they might have financial troubles, they might have marital conflicts, and be involved in domestic violence and sexual assault. Verbal aggression in marriages is up to 2 times more likely to occur when someone consumes alcohol. Physical aggression is 3 to 4 times more prevalent if alcohol is consumed, and a consumption of 1 liter per capita increases divorce rates by 20%. So how does this affect children more specifically? So children that grew up in a house with alcohol abusers tend to have more anxiety and depression, grow up with a codependent mindset. So codependency is basically how your mind responds to the mental effects of dealing with people that are abusing alcohol around you. And this usually involves behaviors as having a hard time setting boundaries, a lack of coherent identity, a lack of knowing who you are as a person. You have a hard time understanding what normal behavior is in other people, and you have an excess denial of the problem at home. Children are often 4 times more likely to use or misuse alcohol in their life. They start to neglect school and they are unable to make bonds with friends. This also leads to isolation, approval seeking, low self-esteem, fear of abandonment, having that victim perspective, and a fear of authority. They also have a really hard time trusting themselves. They become hypervigilant of every situation around them, and they prioritize the needs of other people above their own. So there are various treatments that someone with AUD can look into, or there are also many other treatment facilities that deal with the families and children of families that have AUD people. So the first one is the American Addiction Center. This is their hotline, and basically you can call them and they will set you up with a treatment facility that is right for your family. Al-Anon, Smart Recovery Friends and Family, and Adult Children of Alcoholic/Dysfunctional Families are all different foundations that will help families and children of people that have AUD. And then also individual therapy has also proven to be pretty helpful for people. And then obviously there's Alcohol Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous that have meetings everywhere. You can go to alcoholicsanonymous.com and they will set you up with a meeting that is in your closest vicinity at any time of the day that you might need that. So now is when I will have my interview with my fiance, and we'll talk more about his personal thoughts on AUD. Okay, so this is my fiance, Marco. He was kind enough to do this interview for my presentation. So are you ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was the hardest part of dealing with your dad's alcoholism?
Well, I think the hardest part for me was really the unknown. Like a lot of people talk about the fear of the unknown, but mine was like unknown of him killing someone or killing himself because of him being drunk all the time. And the most prominent one for me was his drunk driving, because that was just like, oh, okay, let's just go. And it's like, but you're hammered. Yeah, it's fine. Like, so because of that, there was a really high anxiety that kind of came with, oh, he's not at home. I don't know where the hell he is. Is he drunk? Is he safe? Is he moving? Like, what's happening? And it's just that 24 hours a day until you know that he's in the house. Like, okay, cool. He's not hurting anybody. But, like, when you're on high alert your whole life, suddenly when they're gone, that doesn't go away. That doesn't change. It's still there.
So do you think this still affects you now?
I think so. Definitely, like, it left a good mark on the way that I think, like, my psyche. It's different than when I was a kid. You know, I mean, like, you kind of grow up, at least from what I saw, you grow up with the expectation of, like, oh, just, like, focus on you. That wasn't the case for me, and I grew up needing to be constantly vigilant of when somebody around me was drunk or on drugs. Like, I had to. And so it kind of builds that idea that, oh, somebody's on drugs, I need to like mama goose it. It's not normal. So that turned into me now having a weird scale of perspective for a problematic situation. I have a scale where if nothing is severely damaged around me and I am not in physical danger, everything's fine. But that's not fine. That is survival mode, and survival mode is not living.
What did his alcoholism do to your family?
I think, like, going from the top, like, looking at it from my perspective at my brother to start. My brother's actions were definitely shown this model of being an alcoholic's fine early on. It prefaced him to be like, okay, I can be an alcoholic, that's fine. And that's what he is now. He's an alcoholic and a drug addict. And, like, seeing him turn into that and knowing how much of his childhood was so similar to mine is a very stark contrast for me. And I always thankful for like how my life turned out because of it, unfortunately. But I think he's also aware of it at a level like now. And so that was about my brother, right? But then, it also goes back to how did it affect my mom too? Because she grew up in an alcoholic family too. And so, like, you start to see the cycle that happens, especially going to rehabs and stuff. You hear about, oh, well, there's a really high chance of somebody in your, like, older family or an ancestor, if they were alcoholic, somebody's going to get it. And that's clearly something that skipped my mom, but ended up with my brother because she is very codependent. And knowing that she grew up in that after the fact, like after dealing with my dad's situation, I realize now I don't think she had an opportunity to be her own person. She just was the person she was raised to be. She never got to, oh, you know what, maybe this isn't great. Maybe I should move on in some things. And she just didn't. So she just leaned into that. And seeing her now, I mean, she's almost in her 70s. Like, that's crazy to think that she never got to experience her life outside of that cycle.
And she is still dealing with your brother's alcoholism as well. So
yeah,
she is still stuck in that codependent
exactly
cycle,
which is
unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing. It's like you'd think, oh, like it ends when that immediate person's gone. It's like no. If there's somebody who triggers those same traits, it can snap in a second, and it sucks, And then, I mean, for myself, like going back to like how it affected everybody from my family, I think for me, it made my sense of self and my ego like on a scale of like thousandths of a percent of matter in my brain. Like I do not matter in my family, which is not how family dynamics work. That's not how they're supposed to work, right? So for me, it became a situation of like, okay, how do I matter now? How do I matter? And so eventually, not being in that dynamic, I realized, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a workaholic. I'm like, unfortunately, in that same sense, like we live in a capitalistic society. That's rewarded. That's okay. But it's not, So that's one upside / downside of it. But it did, like I said before, also affect me in a way that I have to cope with things that I think people in less chaotic families learn earlier on. Mm-hmm. Like, your space is your space. Your things are your things, and that's okay. But your emotions are also okay. Those are not traits that were passed down for me. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, just going off of that, though, my sister luckily became a really responsible person out of all of this. But after doing that, she realized a lot of things, and it honestly ended up becoming the driving wedge between her and my family. So, those bonds were broken, but it was luckily because she was able to break a cycle. So that's good, and although it did drive a wedge between us, I think hopefully in the future it'll provide a place to start out going forward. So that's what I think, at least.
So even though the situation overall, I guess, was bad, you and your sister both happened to break that generational cycle,
mm-hmm.
and hopefully will continue.
Yeah, definitely.
So unfortunately, your father did pass away due to his alcohol abuse. So I'm sorry about that.
Is what it is. I mean, but that's the thing. He knew that there's only 3 ways that go. Like, they say this in AA. There's 3 places you end up as an alcoholic: in jail, in the hospital, or dead. You saw how that played out. So I hope that going into the rest of our lives, that it never becomes a problem. Because, yeah, it does a lot of damage, just overall.
Well, I thank you very much for participating in my presentation.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Thank you.